All right, welcome back. It's MAPD724 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's week 5, part 1. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be doing a special recording just for you guys for the Unity, an intro to Unity for iOS application development. I'll be putting this video up later on eCentennial direct, right? So you'll have it. Okay, so hopefully by now you've downloaded Unity Hub and you're into. Again, from an install perspective, I have two installs. I have 2019.3 F6. This is the latest version of Unity. The problem with this one is sometimes, for whatever reason, it's giving me some really glitchy stuff with iOS development. So I've asked you to download 2019.2 19F1 or 20F1. That's the newest one that just came out. Whenever you want to do an install, when we have Unity Hub, there's a bunch of options. One, projects. There's learn. So if you want to learn different things to do, there's little tutorials that are built in now into Unity. This is new. Within the last year or so, they've had a lot of success with these tutorials. So if you want to learn about 3D games or whatever, really cool, and it's built in. There's also tutorials that you can kind of watch online. It's all built into Unity Hub now. Installs basically allows us to install different versions of Unity. And when we're developing stuff, for example, right now what we're doing is we're developing this game for iOS and we're using 2019.2, in my case 19F1. Maybe a year from now, if you had made an application and you want to update it, you might have a new version of Unity, 2019.3. Whatever. And it may not be compatible with the previous version. So the great thing about this is Unity stores every download of everything that is ever made up online. So if I click add, you can certainly select one of the defaults that we have here. Or if you go down to where it says download archive, you can download any version of Unity from their website. So if you go to download archive, you can see that these are all the versions all the way back to Unity.3. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but if you wanted to, you could. And then we're at 2019.x. You can see that there's different versions of it. This is the version that is probably the most reasonable one at this point, 2019.2.20. 3 has just come out of beta, and I don't recommend this yet. I'm going to wait for this to be a little bit fresher. It's it just came out January 27th, so it hasn't been very long. This has been updated, but 2019.2x has been around pretty much all last year. Okay, so it's pretty good. And if you click on Unity Hub, it'll actually take any install you have here, including older ones. For example, let's say you get a project in your work, and they say, you know what, I have a project that was made with 2017.434. Then you can go down to 434 and then add that into Unity Hub, and it'll be an install option. Otherwise, it won't be installable from Unity Hub by default. So notice that, I'm just going to close this off. Notice that in the only one that I have is this right now because that's the defaults. Okay, there's also, notice they also show you pre-releases. So if you want to try stuff out, if you're not making a new app and it's not a development that you're trying out, you're just learning new stuff, you can always try pre-releases. This is an alpha release you can download of the software too if you want. Okay, again, we're not doing that. We're using 2019.2.20 F1 or something like 2019.2 something. Okay, so if you've downloaded 2019.3, that's okay. Please re-download 2019.2 this version or something around that. Okay, next. So now in terms of installs, it's going to ask you, do you want to, and this might be different for you than for me, it might ask you if you want to download documentation. I don't recommend downloading documentation. There's also other language packs that you can download, I believe, for different Asian countries. We don't need Lumen OS or Facebook Game Room. I chose to install Windows Build Support because I want to make it compatible with my Windows machine, right? So if I want to build for Windows, I can do that. WebGL is great if you want to show your stuff up on the web, and it's an option. But the two that you need for sure are iOS Build Support and Mac Build Support, because we want to build it for both, just to see what the difference is. Okay. All right. So you can see that you need a bunch of space required for this stuff. Notice that the iOS Build Support alone is 3.5 gigs, which is pretty big. And it's bigger than the Mac Build Support, which is like not even half a gig, right? So that's pretty cool. WebGL support, almost a gig. Windows Build Support, less than half a gig. But the whole thing, including the editor, It's estimating something around 12 gigs. Okay, that's how big it is for the actual application. This can take a long time for you to download and install. So for the people in the room, can I get a hands? Who's anyone not have their application installed by now? Ignat, you're good now? Anyone not good? You're still not good? Okay. Sorry? No space. Okay. So that's why I'm installing. You can also use the machine in front of you, and it's not impossible. You can use that to make it go. All right. So I'm going to click cancel because I'm not going to download anything new. And I'm going to go back. When you've downloaded everything, now go to projects. When you go to projects, you won't see a list like this for me. Okay? You're going to see nothing. And you're going to click new. All right. Again, if you have more than one install like I do, you'll have to specify which one you want to start with. I'm going to specify this one. And then it's going to bring you to this loading screen here. Again, this is all being recorded, so there's nothing for you to worry about. If you don't capture this, we're good to go. So you can download different projects. These two are kind of the newest pipeline, the newest rendering pipeline. This is the high definition rendering pipeline. It's a scriptable pipeline. And this is the lightweight rendering pipeline template, those two. We're not going to be using this one. There's 3D with extras. 3D with extras gives you all kinds of additional content. And there's also 3D, which we're not doing. We're going to do 2D because that's the thing we've been doing with sprites, Sprite Kit. Okay, so we want to match up to what we already have. So I'm going to click this one, 2D. Okay, I want to rename my project. You can name it whatever you like, but I'm going to name my project MAPD724 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's going to be Lesson 5. Okay? I'm going to click create. So when I do this, what Unity is going to do, Unity Hub, is it's going to go through and create my project. Again, I get a bit of a messy desktop here, but we'll talk about this in a sec. And you get something that looks like this. Okay, now if yours doesn't look like this, or maybe your machine took a little longer to do this than mine, that's okay. Yours might look like this, right? Does yours look like this? My friends, this is not a good layout, okay? I'm going to show you my layout. This is the way I work when I use Unity. It's not, I don't know, we joke around. It's like my pro layout, right? It's not a pro layout. It's my layout. I prefer you to do this. Go to default on the right. This is just layout of the panels. That's all it is. You go to default and choose tall, okay? Tall. When you choose tall, you get this, okay? And this is pretty good. Tall is pretty good. Notice that I have my assets folder and it's pretty large. It says scenes here. I want to go to my little slider right here, and I'm going to just slide it to the left. So it becomes really small, like a little, so I can slide it to the right and slide it to the left. I'm just sliding it to the left here. All right, let's talk about the windows. Whenever we talk Unity, all right, there's a bunch of these panels. Each of these panels are tearable, not as in bad. I mean, you can tear them off. Right? So if I want to tear the hierarchy panel off and I want to have it floating, I can do that, right? If I want to tear the project panel and have that floating around, I can do that too. And if I delete something or if I close it off, I want to close these things or whatever, tear the inspector panel and then say close that off too. I can do that. And if I have a problem with that, I can always go back and put it back, right? I want my tall version again, it's back. Okay, so don't worry about that. If you're missing a panel, you can always go to Window, and under Window, you'll see all the panels that you want. You can get them all back right here, okay? So, again, let's talk about what this is. So this is the scene view. This is scene view. The scene view shows you this little camera, yeah? Are you with me? There's also the game view. This is what actually is going to be in your game. And we're going to come modify this view in a second, okay? So this is the game view, and this is the scene view. The scene view is where you're going to work. This is your drag and drop environment. This is your development environment in here, the scene view, okay? Notice that there's a bunch of little buttons up here. We'll talk about them in a bit. And there's some buttons up here, okay? We'll talk about those in a bit. These are kind of control buttons for the game objects. All right, and then I have this one, the scenes. I'm going to drag it to the left. I have this scenes. Everything in Unity, and this is the project inspector. This window here is really important. This is where all of our stuff goes. So as an example, I can put everything inside assets. There's also packages. We don't want to mess with this one. But assets is where we're going to put all of our stuff. Textures, models, materials, cameras, game objects. Everything is going to go inside of our assets folder. Okay, that's where it's going to go. Right now we have one folder in our assets folder called scenes. Are you with me? Take a look. Let's rename this scenes folder, right? We're going to rename this thing by clicking on it once and then twice, not double clicking, just once and then twice, and then putting an underscore in front of it. Underscore scenes. Why am I doing this? Because if I put an underscore, it's going to be at the top from a hierarchy perspective. So notice if I did this thing here, scenes is going to be at the top. Okay? I'm also going to double click inside there and change my sample scene. So this is what sample scene, it looks like this. You might see it big like this. This sample scene, let's rename this thing to main. All right, main. And it's going to ask me to reload my scene. Do you want to reload? And the answer is yes, I do. So now I have this main scene. Are you with me? I'm going slow because there's a lot of stuff to take in today. So main scene, I have my scenes folder. I'm going to, in a second, I'm going to add some more folders. The first thing I do when I launch Unity, I'm just going to make this really big right now, is I want to put more folders in here. I want to create a structure for my project. Why? Because we're going to have lots of stuff. We're going to have textures. We talked about textures for sprites when we did things with SpriteKit. Textures are just images, bitmaps. In game dev, we call them textures. That's what we do. We don't call them images or sprites typically. Okay? So let's make a new folder under the assets folder, and there's a couple ways you can do this, right? I can right click in here. If I right click, I can just say create new folder, and we'll call this folder underscore scripts. Okay, this is the one folder I want. This is where all my scripts are going to go. Okay, I can right click again, a new folder, and I'm going to call this next one textures. And let's just keep adding them. Another one, which is materials. If I can spell properly. Materials. So scene, scripts, materials, textures. Let's add another one. Maybe we'll call this one models. We may not have any models right now, but we're going to have models. And maybe we'll have a very important one, which is called prefabs. Let's put one called prefabs. Okay, prefabs folder. Okay, so far so good. Scenes, scripts, materials, models, prefabs, and textures so far. And you'll be like, wait, what is all this stuff? Right now it's just empty stuff. It's just organization. That's all I'm doing. I'm organizing my project. That's what we're doing first. I'm using underscore because remember scenes and scripts? I'm going to use that stuff a lot. I'm going to do a lot of stuff with scenes and scripts, right? So that's why I've made these underscores. They're at the top. They bubble up, okay? And notice my assets configuration is on the left. I can click any one of these things to look inside here like a folder. By the way, the operating system will look very similar. Your files in your Finder will look very similar to this now. Okay. All right, so let's go back, and this is the project inspector. This is where we put in our assets and everything else. Assets are like the lifeblood in the game. No assets, no game. Next, this part. This is called the hierarchy. I want you to think about this as the outliner. Just like we have in iOS, we can put any assets you want in here, and anything that's in this part in the hierarchy at the beginning of the game is what is going to be instantiated. Okay? So I make a game object, I put it in here. There is one game object that's already in here. It's called main camera. Do you see that? Main camera. Okay. If I click on main camera, on the right, you'll see there's an inspector. The inspector is another gadget, okay? And notice that it's separated into sections here. Look, there's a section up here, right? By the way, I can collapse these sections. There's a section down here, and there's another section down here, okay? All right, what the main camera is called a game object. What I want you to think of the game objects, we made game objects with SpriteKit, remember? Our game object. Remember I talked about this being a container? That's what this is. But in Unity, every game object, even empty game objects, have the transform component. So see this right here? this transform component exists on every game object. If I want to add a new game object to my hierarchy, I can simply just right-click and add a game object. I'm going to make an empty game object right now. It's going to be an empty. They just called it game object, but notice on the right, when I make this empty game object, the inspector shows me a context-sensitive information that shows me the transform. Remember, transform must be on every game object. That is required. All right? Why? It tells us about position. Then there's rotation and scale. This is a standard transform. In other programs, it might be called location. But really what we're doing when we're transforming, we're translating. We have a translation matrix. This is a matrix, right? A transform matrix. And we can move things around by using these properties. Okay? So that's our game object. Let's just delete it. We can right-click and delete a game object the same way. I can delete. So I can add by right-clicking, example, any one of these game objects, and I can delete by right-clicking and deleting. We have one game object in play right now called main camera. Let me talk about the main camera for a second. Well, we're making a 2D game, but we still have a main camera. Why is that? Well, it looks like it's 2D. It looks pretty flat, doesn't it? This is the size of the screen right now. But actually what's happening, this is actually 3D. If I click on this little 2D marker right here, and then you see what it really looks like. It looks like this. If I scroll out with my scroll wheel, by the way, to do Unity properly, you need a mouse, right? No mouse, you're going to have more challenge. That's not going to be impossible, but you should have a mouse to use. And a good 3-button mouse is recommended, okay? If you don't have it, it's okay. But notice that I have, when I click 2D, it moved from this view, and again, I'm just scrolling in and out. If I use my touchpad, you can use your 2 fingers to scroll in and out with your touchpad if you have your Mac. If you use 3 fingers, or sorry, that's what this does. And this is okay, right? Kind of scrolling in and out. I can't really do. I can do this if I kind of use my pinch and zoom action like this with my 2 fingers. Take a look, guys, like this, pinch and zoom. It actually hides the sidebar, okay, which is kind of cool. So if I want to see my whole scene, I can hide and show my sidebar just like that, okay? So that's something you can do with your Mac that you can't do with Windows machines, actually. So that's kind of cool. But you need a 3-button mouse. Why is that? Because if you have a 3-button mouse, you can do things like use the hand. Now, if you don't have a 3-button mouse, you just can click up here. So if you click the hand tool, and if you hold it down, if you click the hand tool, and then if I left-click in here, I can move this anywhere I want. Okay? So this hand, which is up here, by the way, it's accessible with the Q key. All of these keys, the hotkeys, are Q, W, E, R, T, Y. All right? And U. So these ones up here, look. Hand, Q. I want to move something, my move tool, W. I want to rotate, it's E. I want to scale, it's R, right, and so on. So the QWERTY keys on the top are the main control keys for this stuff up here. So if you don't remember anything, remember those things. So my hand, I can move this around. If I click the W key or the move tool, it gives me these little handles, right? And if I want to control something that's in my screen, I can use the handles to move these things around. Please don't do that right now because the camera is set up to a certain spot. These handles move the object in world space. Okay, let me talk about that again. World space. It has a coordinate system. Right now, we're in 2D. It looks like we're in 2D, but actually, we're in 3D. And the camera sits at about -10 on the z-axis, right? So we're at 0, 0. Notice my object, my handles, this little gizmo, is actually in the middle of my object. And this, the middle, by this chance, is 0, 0. That's where it is. So 0, 0 is right here. Next, in the camera component, every camera has another component called the camera component. Remember, a main camera is just a game object with additional components. One of the components is the camera component. The other component is something called an audio listener. So an audio listener, wherever the camera is, that's where we're going to hear audio from. I can have only one audio listener on the scene at the same time. Only one audio listener. So the main camera has a couple things. One, clear flags, it says. Clear flags, it says solid color. Solid color means you're going to see a solid color in the background, right? And it's chosen a color for you by default. The color that we've chosen is blue. This color here, blue. Okay? However, if you want to, you can change the solid color to anything you want. And I can do that by just clicking in here once. It'll bring up this little color wheel. You can put actual values in here if you want. You can also switch the type. If you want to use HSV or something else, you can choose that over here, right here. But meanwhile, you have this color wheel. You can change the colors manually, RGBA, or you can just pick a value in here and it'll change the color in real time to whatever you want. Let's make this color black for now, right? So we'll make it black so that we know there's nothing in the background. Whatever color we make this, that is what's going to show up in the game. Remember, this is the scene tab. There's another tab next to it called game. This is what we're actually seeing in the game, black. Okay, there's nothing that's there. So scene tab and then the game tab. Scene tab is where we work, we do our development. Game tab is the actual preview of the game in here. Okay? So again, I've chosen the camera, game object. I've gone to background. I've changed the background color to black. That's what I've done. Next, culling mask. Okay. With different cameras, I can choose not to see things on the scene. Some things have a different layer, and I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but basically right now it's seeing everything. That's what this means. Projection type, orthographic. Okay, what's the difference between orthographic and perspective? Anyone know? I'm bringing it into Blender for this one to talk about it. I'm not going to do this here because we got to talk about it slightly differently. So I'm going to bring Blender up. Blender is my 3D tool of choice. It's free download. Here it is. Here's Blender. And you can see now this is perspective. If I take this object here, right, and I want to move it across the Z-axis, or sorry, the X-axis, you can see the farther I move objects in perspective mode, even though they're the same size, they appear to be smaller, like in the real world. If I take a look at you way down there, my friend who traveled to India and came back, did you have a successful wedding? Awesome. But if I go like this with my little fingers, I can like squish your little head in, right? Because you look like you're far away, but you're not. You're actually a real person, and you're really big. I couldn't squish you if I wanted to. But the farther we look away from something, farther objects appear to be smaller, right? Closer objects appear to be bigger. That's perspective, right? However, I can switch from perspective to orthographic. Orthographic objects, so if I go, again, back to here, and I want to see my view. So I want to switch from perspective to orthographic. So here's the view. I can change my, my perspective. So right now it says perspective or orthographic. Here's what orthographic looks like. Look at it. It's the same object, but now here's this. If I move it across the x-axis, take a look now. If I say move across the x-axis, it's the same size. Wherever I move it across the x-axis, it doesn't look like it's any smaller. Why? It's orthographic. The camera's frustum is square, right? If I move back to perspective, so let's move back to perspective mode. The camera's frustum is a cone. It looks like this. So going back to our Unity scene for a second, just a second, then this is what's happening here. Orthographic is seeing things, and it appears that we're looking at things in 2D or flat. It looks flat like this, okay? This is the flat perspective of this camera, okay? So if you notice, this camera is looking flat, but if I go back to 3D, it's actually not 2D. It's actually a really long frustum. Let me just go over here. I'll navigate for a second. I'll talk about how to do that. You can see that this is what it really is. Here's my camera, and I'm looking way down here. One thing to note is we have this little part right here, and this is the near plane. And the part way over here, that's the far plane, and it's 1,000 meters away. Notice you can see that in clipping planes. Clipping plane says my near plane starts at 0.3 meters. My far plane ends at 1,000 meters. So actually there's 1,000 meters of clipping that I can have in here in depth. Now this is ridiculous. I don't need all that depth. and I can certainly cut this back. Let's cut it back. So instead of 0.3 and 1,000, let's move to 0.3 and, I don't know, 50, like this. You can see that now this is the far plane, and this is the near plane. And I've just changed these two values, 0.3 and 50. There's also something called size. So what size is the vertical size, like it says here, of the camera view. And if you hover over any of these guys, it gives you some idea of what they are. For example, I hover over culling masks, it says which layers the camera renders. If I hover over a projection, it tells me what the projection is, right? If I hover over size, it tells me this. If I hover over clipping planes, it tells me the distance from the camera with the rendering starts and stops, because the near plane is where it starts and the far plane is where it stops. Okay, furthest point from the camera. Then we have something called the viewpoint rect. Okay, this is interesting. The viewport rect, it says where on the screen this camera view will be drawn, measured in viewport coordinates from 0 to 1, where 0 is on the left and 1 is on the top right. Okay, so you can see that my coordinate starts at x is 0 and y is 0. My width is 1, which means 100%, and my height is 1, which is also 100%. I could have multiple cameras, and they can appear in different parts of my screen. If I want to have 4 cameras, or 5 cameras, I can have whatever I want. And they'll render different parts of my screen too. All right, so that's what these all things mean. I'm not going to go much more into detail, but you can see that there's lots of options about how we can see the scene. Let's move back into 2D by clicking the 2D button. Back into 2D. Next, we want to make it so we're looking at a device, some kind of iOS device, okay? But what I want to do first is, if we build like this, we're going to build for Mac. I don't want to build for Mac. We're making a game for iOS, right? A game for iOS. So if I go back to game right now, the game tab, notice that there is display 1, and there's something else called free aspect up here on the top. I want to change from free aspect to something else. For example, an iPhone XR, which is, if you don't have this, do you have this option? We can add it. If you go back to the bottom, on the bottom here, we can click it, and we can say that I want a new label. Let's call it iPhone XR. And then you can choose a fixed rate resolution. There's different kinds of resolution, aspect ratio or fixed resolution. Let's move to fixed, and then change the numbers here to width and height. The numbers should be 828 by 1792. 828 by 1792. That's your iPhone XR. Okay? I'm going to choose this one. I'm going to choose this option right here, which makes my view very, very slim, like an iPhone XR. Again, I've gone here into, instead of free aspect, I've chosen iPhone XR. I made this. Are you with me? This is important. This aspect, it influences the size of my game in many ways, right? Let's go back to my scene view. Notice my scene view changed too. My scene view matched the resolution of my phone, okay? And also my preview for my camera, which is down here, looks more like a phone now than it did before. So I've modified my view so it looks like this. I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see this. So this is the area that I'm going to draw stuff in here. Next, I'm going to go to File. Go with me. This is all set up right now. I'm going to go to Build Settings. Build settings, this is interesting. Unity actually can deploy to many, many, many types of platforms, right? Right now you see it has PC, Linux, Mac, iOS, in my case, WebGL, tvOS if I want to, a PS4 if you have the license, an Xbox One, Android phone, and Facebook. All I care about is iOS. Let's click on this iOS. When you click there, I want you to go down to where it says Switch Platform, and click that button, Switch Platform. What it's going to do is it's going to change stuff over so it's compatible with iOS. Again, I clicked on iOS here. I went to File, Build Settings, and I clicked iOS and click Switch Platform. It might take a few minutes or a few seconds to do this. Sorry? Sorry? Can I what? Repeat. File. build settings. If I go to build settings, you're going to click on iOS, and then you click on switch platform. Give me a switch platform, buddy. You got that? Okay, sorry. All right, it says run in Xcode. Here's something interesting. iOS, when we run in Xcode, it'll actually run my application when it's done in Xcode if I want to build it. And it says the latest version. Run in Xcode as a release. I can also run it as in debug mode. I'm running it as release, that's for sure. Okay, now I need to click on player settings on the bottom left. Player settings. Let's click that first. Player settings might bring it up here or over here. It's up to you. It's another little window that comes up. And this is a really, really important window. Okay? Let me explain what this does. This is like your manifest. This is like what we see on Xcode. Okay? So I'm going to bring this up. Yours might look slightly different than mine. I'm projecting, so yours might look better than mine. Okay? But if you notice, player settings come up, and I have this default company. Guys, we cannot have default company when we make an app. We have to choose a company. Let's just choose Centennial College for now. All right? And you can space it out. It's a company. It doesn't have to be specified. Product name. What is your product called? Okay, even though my project is called MAPD blah blah, I can have a different product name. Again, you know what I'm going to call it? Mail Pilot, because we're going to do that again. Mail Pilot. Version is 1.1. And if I scroll down, you can see this little button which shows us iOS. I can choose a custom icon. All that stuff is here. Different application icons for different iPhones. I can choose those things. It shows me if I want, just like I would normally do in Xcode. Then I have my resolution and presentation. Notice it says my resolution scaling mode is disabled. If I want to, I can scale it up. Now this is interesting. It says allowed orientations for auto rotation. Portrait, portrait upside down, landscape right, landscape left. Guess what? All of these are going to be disabled except for portrait, because we're going to make a game that's up and down, just like the other game we made in Sprite Kit. Multitasking support, definitely, we're going to keep that on. Status bar is hidden. We definitely want that on. Status bar style, if we had one, would be default. We don't have one though. Okay, so are we good with that part? We need to make those changes because otherwise it won't look right. Okay, let's click back on this resolution and presentation title. If we do that, you can see I can collapse and hide by just clicking on that title. I want to go to splash image. If there was a splash image, you can include it here. You can also include, I can show or hide the Unity logo. If I had a professional version of this, I could turn this off. I don't have to show the Unity logo when I'm making my game. Now we're using a personal version, which is free. It's going to show Unity on it. Okay? Next, debugging and crash reporting. If I wanted to debug, you can see that it says log Objective-C uncaught exceptions. Right? We can do that. Enable crash reporting if I want to. I'm not going to put this on right now. Enable internal profile. Deprecated. Definitely not going to do this. Other settings. This is important. Rendering. Color space gamma. This is okay for now. Auto graphics API. It's checkmarked. Leave that on. All right. Metal editor support. If I want to write things in Metal for 3D support, I'd have this checked on. We're still all good with everything. GPU skinning. I'm going to leave this off. Right? And these are all additional features. Where I want to go to is this one. This bundle identifier. That's what I really want. That's what I'm really here for. So what is the bundle identifier? This is the identifier I'm going to use. Right? It's not centennialcollege.com. It's centennialcollege.ca. Make sure we get that right. So .ca. There we go. Version is 0.1. Build is 0. Signing team. Now this is important. We don't have a signing team yet. We're going to set this up later. C++ compiler and everything else we can leave the same. If I keep scrolling, it says prepare iOS for recording. No. Force iOS speakers when recording. No. Requires persistent Wi-Fi. Not really. These are all some things we want. Okay, next, target device. It says iPhone and iPad. No, we want iPhone only. Please change that to iPhone only. This is important. It'll actually change the performance. Target SDK, whatever the device is. Okay, target minimum iOS version, iOS 10. It won't run on previous devices. Anything earlier than iOS 10 is not going to work. Okay? It says requires ARKit support. No, we're not doing any kind of AR. All right? Automatically add capabilities. Keep that checked. This is important. And there's more in here for optimizations. We may come back here again for something else. Okay? So that is at least the bare minimum that we need here for our player. If we don't have some of this stuff, it won't run properly. It won't build onto our phone, which we want to do. We want to build this thing onto our phone. Let's click this close button now, this red X, and we can close that off. Notice that my scenes in the build are my main scene. There's only one scene in the build, this one. I also want to close this off. I'm not building anything yet. I'm just closing this off. So once I've switched platforms, now that's going to influence how my game is going to look. Notice it also went back here to free aspect. This is important to note. Look, it switched back to free aspect, guys. Don't allow that. One thing you can do now is you can choose all these presets. Look what it did. It actually created a bunch of presets for me. So I can choose iPhone X, XS, XR, right? I would like to see iPhone 11, right? You can see that that is not an option, right? But iPhone XS is definitely an option. And this happened only when I switched over from the regular mode to this mode, okay? Notice that XR is, again, the right size, 1792, in portrait mode. I want to choose this one. And it changes my view back to what this is before, all right? It's very important we change this now. Otherwise, you won't have the proper orientation. Are you with me? Cool. All right, so that's the first thing. Let's try and run this thing the way it is. If I click this little button, this actually builds my app. So if I click it, it'll just run it, and you'll see it come up here, black. You should see this black thing come up. This is our preview. Our preview is live. Okay? Let's stop it. So starting and stopping, you start. When you build, you click this little play button. You wait for it. When it turns blue, it's running. If you can pause it, or you can stop it if you click the play button again. All right, so that's the building process. But that's building in the editor. It's not building a build. I'm not going to run this on my phone. I'm only running it here locally. I'm not going to even do it on the simulator. There's no simulator here. Everything I'm going to run in the editor, which is kind of cool, in one place. Okay, next, we need some kind of game objects. Hey, we have game objects, guys. We have them from our previous MailPilot build. Remember? So if I go back up to Chrome, right, and if I look at my Centennial College, going back to some weeks, let's go my table of contents for a second. If I go back to some weeks ago, like way back over here, I have assets, right? These assets from week 2. Let's pull these assets down one more time. So I'm just going to download these assets, right? I'm going to download. I'm going to use the exact same assets from MailPilot, and I'm going to put them in the right spot. Now, I know where mine is. You should know where you open up your app. If you don't, it's okay. I'm going to go to desktop, and for me, it's folders, I believe. Under folders, I have MAPD. Maybe I didn't put it. Oh yeah, here it is. Unity projects. MAPD724 W2020 Lesson 5. That's where I want to go. And inside my assets folder, I want to put this other folder. Right, it's a zip folder right now. I'm just going to put it in my assets folder like this, and just press save. Okay. It's in my assets folder, okay, right now. So again, if I open up in Finder, show in Finder, here is what my assets folder looks like. I'm just going to, for now, I'm going to unzip it. So I'm going to say unzip, double click, right? So again, what I want to do is I want to unzip this one. It's going to do an unzipping. There it is. I want to remove the zip file. I can't call it assets because assets is a specialized name. I have audio and images. I want to take my images, all of these images that I gave you guys. I'm going to put these images inside of the textures folder. So like this, I'm just going to move them into my textures folder. Okay. Audio, I want it on its own. So I'm just going to remove audio, this audio folder. I want to make a brand new folder here. So a new folder. I'm going to call it audio with a capital A. And I'm going to just select everything that's in the audio folder and pull it into my audio folder that's inside my folders. Fonts, that's pretty cool. I want my font for sure. This one is important to have. And again, I want to make a new folder for this. New folder. We'll call this fonts. And we'll pull the fonts in there. And then I'll just delete that assets folder. Okay, so now my assets look like this. Audio, fonts, materials. All right, so how does this look? How does this look in Unity? Well, if I go back to Unity, it kind of starts doing this. It's starting to import all my assets for me automatically. Notice I have an audio folder now. I have a fonts folder now. I have a textures folder now with all my stuff. Are you with me? I'm sorry, say that again? Yeah? No, no, it's okay with a GIF. Remember, we're talking about Unity now. If this didn't work for you, remember, you can always drag and drop. If you bring up your Finder window, here's another thing you can do. You can always download your stuff somewhere else. Let's download it somewhere else for an example. Let's suppose you don't know where this is. I can go back to eCentennial. Here's eCentennial. And let's just download this thing. But I'll put this download in my downloads folder. Here's my downloads folder. Okay, I'll save it. I'm just doing it again in my downloads folder. I'm going to unzip it, and it's going to show me it in my downloads folder, right? The other thing I could have done was do this. I can bring up Unity, and in my downloads folder, I can literally just drag and drop into the right places into my Unity project. Okay, so that's another way to do it. So instead of just bringing it in the way I did, I could have dragged and dropped from my Finder. Or, here's another thing you could do. If I look at my Unity, I can go to Assets, and I can import a new asset the same way. I can import new assets. It'll bring up a little file, folder, and anything that's compatible, it'll allow me to do it from here. So I can, many ways to bring it in. I can go to Assets and import new asset. I can drag and drop, or I can put it in my folder. Once it's in my folder, Unity detects if it's live, that it's inside your folder, and it'll try and import it. Importing means it'll try to convert it into something that's compatible with Unity. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to put my little plane in my scene. So let's put my plane in my scene now. So I'm just going to drag and drop my plane, which is a texture 2D, onto my scene like this. So I've dragged my plane, asset, my texture into my scene. Are you with me? I have this thing called plane now. In my hierarchy, right? Now, remember the rules. The rules are, I'm just going to zoom in here. When you zoom in, by the way, the camera looks like it goes away. If you don't want to see the camera, you just can click off Gizmos. Click off Gizmos, you don't see anything, right? But if I click on Gizmos, you see that and the camera. I can also go into Gizmos, this little pull down, and I can reduce the 3D icons. Again, I'm going into Gizmos, and I can reduce the size of the 3D icons so they're small. See this? I can make it a big icon, the camera, or I can make it really small. I don't care to see it too big. It's kind of like in my way right now, so I'm making it really small. So if I zoom in, again, you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in, or you can zoom in with using 2 fingers on your touchpad, right? 2 fingers will zoom me in. You can see that I have the same exact little plane that I use in our previous game. Now remember what the problem was with our previous game. It was too small. And if I was actually looking at my game, you can see that my plane here is really small, and I decided to make it twice as big. Remember? We want to scale this thing up to twice as big. Well, how do I do that? Well, if I go to my plane, and if I go to the right, it shows scale. I can just literally just change the scale from 1 to 2, right? And you can see now that my plane is twice as big. If this is too big, and it looks like it's too big here, right? I can choose this something else, another scale. Let's say, for example, 1.5. Maybe that's the right scale. And I think that probably is right, 1.5. I'm just changing 1.5 so everything is 1.5. Are you with me? All I did was put the plane on the screen.
Why are you changing Z axis?
Well, only because I want to keep it uniform. No, I don't really need to. But you can't make it 0. It has to be at least 1. So I'm going to change everything so it's 1.5. Look, Z is already very paper thin right now. Remember what this really is. This is not a 3D object. This is 2D. So if I look at it from a 2D perspective, if I go open this up again, you can see that it's exactly that. It's literally 2D. It looks like this. Look. The plane is like sitting in space like this. Look, here it is. There's my plane.
How to enable rotation?
The plane?
Yeah, no, you now can rotate.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
I'm in 3D now,
Yeah,
right? So the way you do that is, I'm trying to think about what to do with your thing.
How you do it with mouse?
You hold down the right side of your touchpad, and you can just rotate it. If you hold it down and drag, you can pan the camera. All right. If you have right mouse capabilities, right? So again, holding down and drag on the right side, you can pan around. Okay. If you're using a mouse, the right mouse button, if you hold it down, you can drag. It'll do it that way. If you scroll in with the scroll wheel, it does that too. Okay. One thing I can do also is I can use fly-through controls. Fly-through controls, it means I can use WASD to fly through the scene. So if I press the right mouse button and hold it down, at the same time pressing W, then I can move very quickly in and out of the scene. I can fly through the scene this way, okay? And WASD it's like first-person kind of controls, okay? Okay, let's go back to 2D. I just wanted to show you that because it looks like it's flat, but it's not flat. Like I said before, it is actually 3D, and our object is right there. In the game, it looks like it's in the middle. Let's run this thing and see what it looks like in real time. It looks like exactly what we see. Yay! Okay, I want to make my first script. Right, we're moving fast here. So this is something different for Unity. What we're used to in iOS is we have a program. We have a game controller. We have structures. Yeah, not so in Unity. In Unity, we have something called scripts. Let me explain this. We're going to build things in C#. We're not going to use Swift anymore for Unity. However, here's the challenge with C#. C# is used as a scripting language. On the back end, what's happening is Unity is taking our script, converting it to C++, creating a package with bytecode, and putting it on the phone. That's what's happening. And that's how this is working, right? If we were going to convert our project, though, it's going to make it an Objective-C project, right? On the back end. That's what we'll be seeing, Objective-C. We're not doing any of that work. We're not looking at Xcode, okay? All we care about is Unity. Remember, if I make it in Unity and it works in Unity, I can make it once and deploy everywhere. For example, if we make our game Mail Pilot today, and you have an Android phone, you can switch your platform to Android. Now, I have to warn you that you'd have to load up all the Android stuff like normally you do. If you're already set up for Android development, you're good, okay? But you may have to do this so you can make it work. But the exact same code in C# will work on Android and iOS, which is really, really cool. Okay, so now we're here. Let's add some scripts. Notice I have my plane. Let's rename this plane right now. I want to change it from plane to player, okay, with a capital P. Plane to player. Are you with me? Plane to player. So I have two objects in the scene. My main camera is an object. I have my player as an object. Notice my player, when I click onto it, on the right, what do I get? I get a transform component, yes. I also get this thing called a sprite renderer. My sprite renderer makes my player game object renderable, drawable. If I don't have this sprite renderer turned on, for example, if I click this little check mark and turn it off, it literally doesn't show my game object anymore. Even though it's there, you can see a bounding area, right? See this, the bounding area right here? But it won't show my game object until I click this sprite renderer on. The sprite renderer basically will allow my game object to display the sprite that's connected to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
No, it's just I might be projecting slightly differently than you. I'm clicking on player. And maybe you turned off Gizmos, I don't know. All right, are you with me? Next. So the player itself has a couple of other things that we didn't notice. Look, the name of the player is up here. You can change the name by changing this part right here, right, if you want to. There's also this other stuff. It says tag. We can change the tag to other things. I want you to change the tag to player, please. Player tag. Okay? Player tag. Layer. This is interesting. There's different layers we can look at. I'm going to leave it where it is to default. Don't change the default layer. Okay, that's what this thing is. All right, and I'm just going to scroll back across and close this window up again. So again, this is what the thing. So I have my renderer, and this is what's going to show my player on the screen. Again, in the game view, it just looks like this. Right? In the scene view, this is where I do my work. Okay, cool. I got my player. And for now, I want to put my ocean on the scene as well. Let's take an ocean. So we got my ocean scene. Let's just drag and drop it onto the hierarchy. Okay, my player, she be gone. It's gone. Why is that? Because of order in layer. It doesn't matter where it is on the hierarchy, guys. That's not an issue in this case. It's not an issue here. It's an issue with this. On the right-hand side, in the sprite renderer, there's something called order in layer. This is like the painter's algorithm we talked about before. I want to click on player, and I want to change my order in layer from 0. This is the Z address, all right? From 0 to something else. Hey, remember what we had? We had our ocean. We had our island. Then we have our player. Ocean should be 0. Island should be 1. Player should be 2. Let's change this to 2. So 2 makes my player appear on the screen again. Order in layer is important. Okay? Are you with me? I'm zooming back out. You can see that this is the ocean. We actually see the entire ocean graphic, and it's too big. Remember, we scaled it down 1.172? It's not going to be exactly the same, but we can try. We can say that this ocean is actually going to be smaller, and we can scale it by using this little scale button by hand. Let's test different scales to see what it looks like. So right now, I want to scale it uniformly. If I only choose this one, it scales it only on the x-axis. I don't want that to happen. Undo, right? If I chose this one, it only happens on the y-axis. I don't want that either. Undo. I want to scale it in the middle. So if I click the middle, it actually scales it uniformly down until what looks like it's hugging the edges of the screen. And if I scroll in, you can see that now, for the most part, it's pretty good. This is different because remember, we had a lot of room in our ocean before, like a ton of room, right? Like tons and tons of room. That's what we had in our ocean before. Main camera, still have 5. Ocean, we still have this. And you're going to say, wait, what the heck? Look, 0.72. That's what we scaled to. So if you want to have the same number as me, make it so that it is uniformly 0.72 across all axes. Just so that way we're good. We're using the same kind of situation as everything else. We're going to have a problem, right? Remember the camera, the ocean? If we want this ocean to scroll like before, we're going to have at least a couple oceans. And they're going to look, the timing is going to be way different than we had before. Make sense? Because if I want this to scroll, I have to have at least one other ocean on the top waiting to come in. I recommend even, the way this is, maybe even 3. Look, this one, maybe another one here, and maybe another one up here. To give me enough room so that it can scroll down while I'm resetting the other ones. We'll see if this is good enough if we just have 2. Again, there's other options. I can choose to do other things here. I'm not going to. Okay. One thing I also want to click on now, we've added a couple of items. If I go to my game, it kind of will look like this. This is our preview of what the game will look like. right? And if I run this thing, nothing's going to happen. It just literally would just draw everything the way it's supposed to be drawn, just like this. Right now it's running. My game is running. Do you see it running? No, but it is. I've got this plus, this play button running, and we're good. Okay. Okay. So this is interesting, right? I mean, we put it in here. We see a preview. You should see the same preview as me, yes?
No.
What do you see?
My ocean doesn't want to scale.
Okay, remember I'm choosing this little button right here? Right here. So this is Q, W, E, R. If you just choose the R button, you'll choose this one. You have to be clicked on the ocean. And then you can choose the middle one and scale, or choose the scale itself, 0.72.
And it is less than the actual pixels.
Less for you?
Yes.
Okay. And there might be a reason for that in terms of your version. It could be the assets, whatever. One thing to note is if I click on the texture itself, the textures folder, and click on my ocean on the right, you can see that there's something that's wrong. Okay, I'm just going to put this out here for you guys, right? Here's the problem, right? My ocean is actually 100 pixels per unit, right? It's not 1-to-1. What we put on this thing, it's 100-to-1. That's why it looks so small, right? Really, my ocean, if I put this back to 1-to-1, watch this. If I take my pixels per unit and change this to 1-to-1 and then click apply, it's going to be massive. It's going to be a massive ocean, an ocean that's so massive it's crazy big, right? And that's with scaling, okay? By the way, again, there's reasons why we do this, 100-to-1 and 1-to-1. What it does is it allows the texture to be compressed a little better, and it's better on smaller devices. So let's go back to 100-to-1, click apply. It's going to take our ocean back to the way it was. By the way, if you're really zoomed out, like way out here, okay? If you're way out here and you can't see your ocean, you can, if you're inside, if you hover your mouse over the left side of the scene and you press the F key, it'll bring your ocean right into view. F is actually a shortcut that does frame select. It'll select your ocean, your object, okay? And don't worry if it's not perfect, even if the values are different than mine. Hopefully you guys have the same values as me. Do you have the same values as me? 0.72? Yeah. Okay, so we have our ocean, and we want to make this plane move around. So whenever I move my mouse, my finger, I want to move my plane around. That's what I want, okay? That's what we did first. So I want to move this plane further down. So I'm going to grab this one, so Q, W, and then I'm going to move this one, not the ocean, undo, but the actual player. Let's click on player and move the player down kind of towards the bottom of the screen. Okay, I'm moving the player down. My y-axis looks like it's going to be something like minus 4.3 is where I'm going to put it. Minus 4.3. So please put it there. Minus 4.3. That's where my plane is going to be. Again, I'm just moving it up so you can see this is the bottom of my plane. I'm zooming in. That's what it should look like. Now let's make sure we rename the ocean by clicking on the hierarchy. Let's rename this ocean with a capital O. Ocean. Okay? Player, ocean. Hey, let's create a new tag for this ocean. All right? Right now it's untagged, and there isn't an ocean tag in here. We need to make our own tag. I'm going to click in here, which is add tag. And I'm going to put in a new tag where the list is and make a new tag. I'm going to call this tag ocean with a capital O and save. By the way, this just adds a tag. If I want my ocean to be an ocean, tagged as an ocean, I got to click back out to the ocean and then select my tag now, like this. So again, all I do is go here and click add tag. Add tag, I can make as many new tags as I want. What are tags? Like names. It's another way of identifying my game objects, and they're very useful. I can go without them if I want, but I like to use them. Okay, so there we have player and ocean. Yay! I'm so excited. All right, remember I talked about scripting? I want my plane to move around now. Okay, how does scripts work? I'm going to click on the scripts folder By the way, are you all with me so far before I move on? Yes, Ignat? Okay. I'm clicking on scripts. It's empty. I want to add a new script. Let me just make this a little smaller and this a little bigger. I'm going to right click here in this area here. Right click and create a new C# script. Up on the top, right here, C# script. When I do that, it's asking me for a name. Let's call this the player controller with a capital P. Player controller. And press enter. Are you with me? Player controller. Okay, here's the test. Double click on the player controller, please. Double click. Now, depending on your default program, I've chosen Visual Studio. You may have chosen Visual Studio Code. It doesn't matter. You're going to see your editor of choice come up. Okay, whatever that happens to be. And give it a sec for it to happen. It takes some time. Sometimes I also wish that we can use Xcode, but Xcode doesn't really work. So again, if I double click on my player controller, it should bring up your editor. If it does not, for whatever reason, like if it stalls here like this, which it shouldn't be doing, like this is not the expected behavior at all. I should actually be able to bring up my player controller here. You can always choose, in this case, Visual Studio 2019 for Mac. I can choose Open, and I can select my file. I can go navigate to where it is. So for example, I can go to my desktop. I can go to where it is. I have it in folders. I have it in Unity projects. I have it in my MAPD724 Lesson 5. I can go into assets, and under scripts, we have this script, which is the player controller.cs. I can literally just open that up, and I should be able to see it here in Visual Studio for 2019. If it doesn't open, it's okay. You can always use other editors. Okay, so you see something looks like this. Notice that I don't really see my solution right now. I don't care. Okay. A couple things to note here. All right. When I open it up, have you been able to open the script by double clicking? Good. All right. So let's talk about this. Here's the script. So I don't have imports anymore. It's C#, right? I have usings. Using system.collections. This is okay. Using Unity Engine. This is very important. This Unity Engine allows me to make my player controller inherit from, this is the inherit, colon is inherit from, mono behavior. Mono behavior is the main superclass that all game objects must have for them to have a script attached to them like this. Okay? If you don't have mono behavior as a script, you cannot attach the script to the game object. And that's how this works as a high level. I make a script, I do whatever I want with it, and I attach that script to the game object. Every game object can have one or more scripts attached to it, which is kind of decentralized. Before, we thought about scripts. Whenever I think about doing things in Xcode, I have all my scripts in my project solution, and then I can use one script to control multiple things, and I have a main structure. It looks like a program. Here, I don't have that. Here I have one or more scripts that I can attach to game objects or not, and I can use them here. So, lifecycle functions. Let's talk about lifecycle functions. There are two lifecycle functions that all mono behavior scripts have. Start and update by default. There's many others too. But those two functions, start and update, when you start a new script, it includes these by default. Notice that there's no constructor. You don't need a constructor here because it's a script. It can act like a script. It doesn't have to be a class. Even though it says class, we're using it as a little script. Okay? So we're using C#, but for scripting. It's different. Okay? Start. This is where I do my initialization. Update. This is where this thing triggers every frame. Anything I put in here is going to trigger 60 times per second. Anything inside update automatically. Okay? That's what it's made for. So what I want to do with my plane is do this. Wherever my mouse position is, right? My mouse position. I want my plane to move around. Now, mouse position doesn't exist, right? On a mobile device, there's no mouse. But we should think about this in the abstract sense, right? The abstract sense. Because if you think about this, right? My mouse is actually my finger, right? But remember, I can make this game for different devices. What if I want to make this game for iOS? It's going to work on Android. And it's going to work everywhere else too, on every device. We have to have some commonality, some way of a control structure. So I'm using mouse in this case. All right, if I type the word mouse, right, you can see that I'm not getting any code hinting. Are you? No. How about this? Input. Try input. And you might be getting some code hinting. I'm not getting any right now, which makes me mad. All right? Because when I don't get code hinting, that's bad. I should get input for sure. Let me just close this down again. And it's really weird. I'll tell you right now, this has been acting really weird today. I'm not sure why, because whenever I click before on double click on player controller, it should just like literally bring up my project here. By the way, what I can also do if I'm really unhappy with this, which is making me very unhappy, I can switch out of this editor. Let's just close this editor down. So quit. And I can use Visual Studio Code instead. However, it requires a bit of a change. Okay, so if I go to Unity again, hopefully it's not going to crash my Unity. Don't crash. I always worry about the spinning stuff, right? That means it's like, it's trying to think. I'm recording. Remember, I'm also recording at the same time. I'm recording and I'm also doing this all at once, so that might be what's causing my slowdown. All right? But what I want to do here is I want to go to my, when it lets me, I may have to close down Unity for a second. Oh, by the way, here, question for you. What if I had to close down Unity now? Do you think it would save my scene? I didn't save my scene. Do you think it would save my scene if I close down Unity?
When you're on it, you save it automatically?
It does do that. It does save stuff. Sometimes it won't. And sometimes if you crash, you'll have to put some things back. That's why it's important for you to save, which I didn't do. I didn't have this problem before, so. Oh, wait. It's still thinking. So if you have a problem like this, I mean, what you could do is you could force quit because it says application not responding. I'm going to do that. I'm going to force quit and go back. It's okay. That's really weird. Let's open that again. I'm also going to close down Visual Studio Code just in case it's just a memory thing. All right, let's notice that I lost. Look what happened to me. A couple things happen. In my scenes, I have main, right? And I have this back. I have to come back and double click on main to get this back, right? In my scripts, I still have the script. If I double click on my player script, what it should do, this is what the expected behavior is, it'll open up Visual Studio and then open up my project, right? That's what it should do. And as you can see, it's just not wanting to do that for me today for whatever reason. It could be I'm running things live. It could be that it's really working hard to do that for me and it's not doing it. But I can switch out of this kind of thing. I can go to Visual Studio, right? Oh, sorry. I can go to Unity and I can go to Preferences. And I can always use a different editor. So notice my external script editor is Visual Studio. I can switch to VS Code, right? I can do that. One thing to note is when I want to switch to VS Code, and I had some buggy stuff happen to me last time, you need to make sure you update your package if you want to use VS Code, if you're using VS Code right now. The way to do that is if you go to Window, right, and you go to Package Manager. Package Manager has a bunch of default packages that get included here. Notice that there is a little thing down here for Visual Studio Code Editor. I need to click on this and update it to the latest version, right? And what this will do is it'll update my VS Code editor in Unity so I get code hinting. If I don't do this, then bad things will happen. And I gotta wait till this is done. By the way, this is per project. It's not global. And there's a reason for this, right? Because when my Unity updates, it'll do something different every single time. All right, so we're cool. Now let's see if I can double click on this and see if it'll run Visual Studio Code. And please run. Yay, that's what I was expecting. My project files. Okay, so again, doesn't matter which editor I'm using VS Code now. I'm in my start, and let me start typing mouse again. If I start typing mouse, you can see that I'm not getting any code hinting, right? No code hinting until I start. If I wait for a while, and you might not get any of this. So what do I need to do to get some of this code hinting? Well, there's an extension in Visual Studio Code on the left-hand side, under extensions, and if you type in Unity, if you're using Visual Studio Code, only if you're using Visual Studio Code. If you type in Unity, then there's the debugger for Unity, and there's something called Unity Tools. Unity Tools, this is pretty good, but the debugger for Unity is definitely what I want. I want those two files. One is from Unity Technologies, right? So if I actually type in Unity Technologies in here, you can see that it's going to bring up Unity Technologies first and any other things that they have that they've made. They've only made this one. This is the official debugger for Unity. We want this. If you're using Visual Studio Code and you don't have this, please install it. And there's other ones. Unity Tools is a really good one. It gives me some good code hinting, right? It gives me some examples of what it does. Unity Code Snippets, that's a really good one. So I can type some stuff in here, like player controller, like you see, and then I can start typing some stuff, and it'll remember a lot of little code snippets for me, okay? Which is really important. Are you getting it?
But when I put mouse, I don't.
Good.
So
Yeah, input is what you need. All right, so let's go back to my player controller for a second, and let's just put input. If I put input dot, and you can see that if I start typing mouse, input dot mouse position, that's what I want, okay? And I don't want to do this in start. I want to do input dot mouse position on update. So what I want to do is I want to change the position of my plane on the X and Y coordinate, right? Every time my mouse position changes. Okay, let me think of what I'm doing. I cannot directly access the X and Y coordinate of my transform. I'm just letting you know. It doesn't work like that. I can't say transform dot position dot X. I can't do that. I have to say something like this. Transform dot position is equal to a new vector2 object. All right? And then I can assign it. Or I can make it a vector3. It doesn't really matter. So I want to update my position. All game objects have a transform. So I can type in transform like this. Transform, lowercase. Transform dot position. My transform component, my position property, and then I can say that it is equal to, right, a new vector3 object, or vector2 object in this case, so new vector2 object. Follow me here, even if you don't get it yet, okay? And then in my vector2 object, I want X and Y coordinates, right? My X coordinate is going to be input dot mouse position dot X, right? And input dot mouse position dot Y. Okay, so this is going to allow me to move my mouse, my object anywhere I want with my finger. This is not MailPilot, how MailPilot works though, okay? Right now we're just testing. So here's my transform. I want to move it around. It's going to happen on update. Every frame, it's going to do this thing, okay? All right, cool. Now, this is what I want to happen, but right now, it's not going to happen. Guess why? This script is not attached to anything. It needs to be attached to the player object. So I'm going to go back to Unity, and if notice that there is the player object itself, which I'm going to bring up in the inspector, and I'm going to drag my player controller script onto this thing right here, like this. Drag it on until you see this little blue line, and then let go. Alternatively, if that didn't work for you, having a problem with that, you can always go to Add Component and type in Player Controller, like this. And you see that that'll come up now. Okay? Either way, whether you drag it on or you add a component, my script has been added. Yes?
How did you enable tools in Visual Studio Code?
Remember, I downloaded a new,
I did it also.
yeah, you gotta wait. It takes some time. You may have to relaunch Visual Studio Code.
I've done it well.
Yeah.
Try your USB code is in reader, no, you should do that.
Yeah, you have to do that too. Yeah. You have to definitely choose your preferences. So in your Unity, remember I did this? I went to Unity, I went to Preferences, and then I chose Visual Studio Code under Unity Preferences, right? You need to do that first. And then you also have to download the package. So if you go to the window, and if you go to Package Manager, you got to definitely go to where it says Unity, my Visual Studio Code editor, and you need to basically update this as well. If you don't do that, then you're not going to get good connection, good code hinting. All right, so I've dragged and dropped my player controller on here. Let's test it. So if I press play now, we should be able to move it around on the screen. Oh man, what the heck? Well, it's moving, but what's going on here? How come it's not moving properly? What's really happening? Well, let's take a look at my scene and see where this thing is. So where is my player now? Well, my player is actually, just to give you a sense of it, right? Here it is on X and Y coordinate, but take a look at this. 1.5 and, well, 1.5, and these are like 36, right? That's not right. These are wacky. But it makes sense. So what I'm actually trying to do is I got my mouse control, but it's looking at screen space. And what I want to do is I want to look at, I want to look at world space, but I want to look at screen space instead. My screen space shows a scale of 1.5, right? Or a really small number, like 4 or whatever. But this is like really, really big. Like for example, if I look at my player and if I just type in my main camera, you can see that my main camera is right here, but my player is like completely somewhere else. Look, my main camera is at 0, 0, 10, minus 10. If I put my player back there, I'm in play mode, by the way, to do this. If I go back to 0, and then notice if I go there and I go back, it goes to 36 because it points to my mouse. Every frame, it's going to update this wherever my mouse is. So again, going back to my game, as I move my object, look, I'm moving it here, I'm moving it here, I'm moving it over here. It's looking at my screen space. My screen space. Look, if I go over here, it's like 6, right? This is my screen space. And if I look over here, if I go to the right, you can see it's like 600. And if I go down, so my screen space starts down here. This is around, look at that. 0, 0 is over here, and this is where my player comes in. I shouldn't be able to do this, guys. That shouldn't be allowed. I'm doing it because my mouse is my mouse on my screen space. So I got to convert my screen space to world space. World space to screen space. All right. All right. Going back to code. This is nice to have, but I want to do something like screen to world point is what I want. Screen to world point. And I want to convert my screen to world point. So if I go screen dot, and I want to go to world point, or if I go world, type that in there. We have to find a way of converting it. And I'm going to go look online. This is the great thing to do. Unity has got a really complete Unity scripting thing. So if I say mouse motion, screen, or world to screen, Unity, right? Then it'll say mouse position screen to world coordinates. Here's the Unity forum. And it'll give me what it looks like, right? It'll give me some code a lot of times to convert it. Here it is, my camera. Here's my vector 3. My camera, if my input.getMouse button up, I can use this, and input.mouse position is camera screen to world point. I want to convert my camera screen to world point to my input. Okay, let's get back and do this again. I'm going to come back and do this again. So that's what I want. I want a new vector 2. So I want a we'll call this the mouse position. And we want to call this a type. We'll call this a vector2. So vector2 is is called mouse position. And I'm going to say that this is equal to my camera, my main camera, and then if I type in, just like it shows here, screen to world point, and if it doesn't, let me ask you something else. By the way, camera, right? So you may not get this, screen to world point. I'm pretty sure that this is how it works. You go screen to world point, and then you put in input.mouse position, input.mouse position, like this. Exactly what it does this. Now it says, I don't know what this is, and if you click over here, it says introduce local for camera screen to world point mouse position. It gives you some hinting for this, right? It says a camera is a device. An object reference is required for non-static field, method, or property. Camera screen to world point assembly. Yeah? Okay, it tells me to create an object called camera. I could do that up here, and then I get a reference to it. So the way to do it is under the public, I can go here and I can call this as a camera type. So public camera, right? I'll call this camera, lowercase. Okay? And then under camera, I can do this, and it'll solve that problem. However, I need to make a reference to it. And if I scroll up here, it says, hey, player controller camera hides inherited member component camera. Use the new keyword if hiding was intended. So what it says is, I don't have to do this. It already exists. Okay? That's what it already does. That's what it says. It says also that the camera attached to this game object is null here. The camera component is obsolete. Property camera has been deprecated. Use get component camera instead, right? If I want to do this. So I don't want this. I want this. Exactly what I had here before, which is what I really want, this. When I make something public and it's a game object in my script, it appears in my inspector automatically. Watch. If I go back to Unity now, you can see that if I don't have any errors, I have now a camera component that appears in the inspector right here. See that? All I did was make it, go back to my VS Code, all I did was make it public. If I make it public and if it's an object that I can see, and if I go back to Unity, it appears in my inspector. Are you with me? All I did I did it inside the class. So it has to be inside the class. It's got to be public. That's the accessor. Camera, the type, and then lowercase camera. I called the name camera. Okay? And then I made it so that you can see it here. Okay. Now that I have this, I can just drag and drop a reference from the hierarchy into that camera like this. This connects the camera as a reference. Remember I told you? Lots of drag and drop. All right, so this here creates my mouse position, and instead of using my input.mouse position, I can just use mouse position now. Mouse position.x and mouse position.y. And then what this will do, hopefully, is move my stuff around properly. Let's see what it does, if it's still wacky. Okay?
Can you just say mouse position?
Yes, I can just say mouse position now, because it is vector 2. Right? Let's see if that's true, though. Let's see if that works. If I run it, does it do what I expect it to do now? Yes or no? Right? Yay! It's on screen. And it doesn't move very much. Look, it's moving very small amounts. Why? It's converting my world space, which is the matrix for my world, to screen space, right? Which is what I'm seeing here. Remember, my screen is this whole thing right here, right? And my world space, right, is what I'm seeing in here, right? So notice that my coordinate system has changed. Make sense?
Yeah, but you can actually get this plane to the black side. I can hide. It's gonna hide.
It should hide. It should hide this thing. Yeah? All right, so that's what I want to do. You should hide it. When you move out of the screen space, you should hide it too. By the way, make sure, I'm at free aspect. That's why. Mine went back to free aspect, my friend. That's what happened. I shouldn't be in free aspect. I should be in iPhone XR. That's why you're not seeing it. Look, it should be here. It should be portrait. I'm not. Now if I go back and run it again, you'll see I have what you have. Watch. See? If I was at free aspect, if I go back to free aspect here, then I can do this in free aspect and move it around anywhere I want. Watch. Right? I don't want that. I want this to be iPhone XR, which is the right thing to do. And you know why I went to free aspect? Because when my Unity crashed, I lost my settings. Let's save the scene. File. If I go to File, Save Scene, or just click Save, it saves the scene. You can also press Command S, and I can also save the project, which is very important to do. Save the project too. Save scene, save project. Save project saves all scenes. Save scene only just saves that scene. Are you with me? Okay. You're not getting main camera at all here? Or you're not getting main camera here? Okay, so let's go back to my script. Remember my script, it looks like this. So public class, and inside my script on line 7 for me, I put public camera. Are you getting any errors? If you're getting errors, you will not be able to do this. On the okay, what does it say? Those errors are preventing you from doing this. What does it say? No. If it's showing an error, right, that's why it won't show up. Any error won't allow your application to build. It'll stop you from making the reference, and that's why it won't show up. Okay? So you can see with a couple lines of code, only a couple lines of code, 3 lines of code, right? I'm able to move my mouse around now. And remember, this is like way harder on iOS. Way harder on anything. iOS, C++, whatever. Here, 3 lines of code. And that's it. And a script. Okay. This looks okay, but it would be nice if I encapsulated it inside of a function. So I'm going to put this in another function. I'm going to call this function move, right? So I'm going to say private. You can make it private. And I'm going to call this thing underscore move. Right? Underscore means private. Oops. Private and returns void. So private void. It's called move. I'm going to grab this stuff here, these 2 things, copy them or cut them into this little function. And then I'm going to call, in update, I'm going to call move. Okay, why am I doing this? Because I want my update to be clean. I don't want it to be cluttered, right? Here, it only does one thing, move. And that's the single responsibility principle, right? Whenever you guys code, think about each function and each class having one responsibility, if possible. Right here, my function only has one responsibility, moving. Let's make another responsibility, check bounds. Yeah, we've done this before. Let's see if we can do this again. So make a new private function or method called underscore check bounds. Okay? All right. What do we want check bounds to do? I'm going to check for my position, my transform.position.x. And by the way, this is nice, what we did to move the object anywhere I want. However, I don't want the object to move anywhere I want. I want it to be locked to the bottom of the screen, just like our game, right? So the way this would work is where my player is right now at the bottom of the screen. Take a look. So let's go to my player. Here he is at the bottom of the screen. I want this so that the bottom of my screen, which my player is at negative 4.3, that's where yours should be too. That's what I want it to stay. I want it to stay at negative 4.3 forever, right? I want it to only go back and forth down here. So that means that this is incorrect, the move function. It should be like this. New vector 2, make it a vector 2, mouse position dot x, right? And then this will be a fixed value of negative 4.3 f. Sorry? I could, but then this would be, you don't know what the original one is, so just make it so it's a fixed value. So it's always the same. Because what if, by any chance, some other function moves it? It'll move to that wherever that is, and I don't want that to happen. I could use a vector 3 if I want to, because this really is a vector 3, right? But I don't care about the z coordinate, and I don't want you to mess with the z coordinate, because otherwise it'll become invisible by accident. So if I did this now, just this, right? And if I run this thing, right? Now when I move stuff around, it only moves it on the bottom. It doesn't allow me, even if I move it up here, it only moves it on the bottom. It doesn't allow me to move it on the top at all, which is what we had in our previous version of the game. So again, the way I did this was, I just changed my move, so it updates my x, but keeps my y at minus 4.3. That's what I've done. 4.3 is that magic number I was talking about. All right, now my check bounds. They're going to be pretty small, and I can check them in my inspector here. So here, I'm going to click this little button or press the W button. I'm going to get these little, this gizmo. And what I want to do is I want to move it over, and I want to say it's going to come from about here. If you want to zoom in, you can see exactly where it's going to be, because it's the control we have now. Right here on the edge, it looks like my position on the x-axis is negative 1.866. Yeah? It's based on the middle position, right? So you got to think of the coordinate system of my world. See where my camera is? That's 0, 0.
Okay.
So 0, 0 goes negative down here and positive up there.
Yes.
Negative over here and positive over there. That's how it works in this coordinate space.
All right, but what is my negative 1.866?
Units.
Inches, units.
Units.
How many pixels am I?
Don't worry about the pixels, because remember, you're going to make this for any phone.
I understand.
Yeah.
Usually
In Unity, in reality, you know what it really is? Meters.
uh,
It's in meters, okay? But we're not going to use meters. We're going to use units, in our case, units. But yeah, so if you look at negative 1.866 here, and if I go to the other side, over on this side, and if I zoom in, it's going to be approximately the same. I don't care if my shadow goes offline, but around 1.86, something like that would be a good thing. So that's what I want, from negative 1.86 to positive 1.86. That is going to be my range. Okay. Haha. Well, I have something that can help us with this. I'm going to say that I want to, instead of checking bounds, this would be nice. Remember we made this check bounds function? Yeah, well, wouldn't it be nicer if something else did it for me every frame? We have something called clamp, right? And I can do it like this. I can say mathf, there's a mathf function, mathf dot clamp, and I can decide the range of values from the minimum to the maximum. Okay? So the way it works is I want to clamp it. So it says value, the floating point value to restrict inside the range defined by the min and max. All right? So I want to restrict this value, my mouse.x. I want to restrict that value between the left bound and the right bound. And my left bound is negative 1.866 and positive 1.866. Negative 1.86, let's say, f, and positive 1.86 f. It's going to only go in those ranges. So now my check bounds function, guys, don't need it. Wouldn't it be nice if I had this before? It limits my movement. It limits my x coordinate totally like this. Now I could have set this clamp function up, you know, in SpriteKit too, but I mean it's here. I might as well just use mathf clamp. All right, let's try this out and see if it works. So if I run this thing, and if I run it now, I should be able to stay within that range, and I will not allow me to go beyond. Look, even if I want to, it won't allow me to do this. There's no need for checking. It does this automatically for me. See? From 1866 to positive 186, it clamps the value right like that, and it does it with one line. Okay? Remember? Optimize for games. Has lots of little utility functions. Are you with me? Okay, cool. I like it. Let's make some sound. I want to hear my engine sound play, right? When my plane comes into the game, my engine sound is playing now. Okay, and it's going to play forever. Let's do it with no code. No code. So again, are you with me with this one? Can I move on? Are you still in trouble? I'll fix you. Don't worry. I'm going to move on though, okay? So I'm going to move on from this. So notice I'm here, and I want to make noise now. Well, I have my audio in here. I have engine audio. I have two of them. One is an OGG Vorbis file. It says Vorbis. And the other one is an MP3, right? Depending on which one I want to use. It doesn't really matter which one I want, but we can test this file out by pressing play. If I press the play button, it'll actually show it. I can't hear it now because it's deadened, but let's just do that, right? And let's make it so that it is, well, it's internal speakers. Let's try it out. It might be because I'm broadcasting. There we go. That's what it's going to sound like, right? Okay, so that's the engine sound. I don't care which one I pick. The way to add it is I'm going to go to the player, and I need another component. I'm going to just collapse these ones to give myself some room so I can show you. All right, they're still there. I'm just collapsing them. I'm going to add a new component to the player, and it's going to be called audio source. Here's my audio source component. Okay, my audio source can take a clip. Let's drag and drop my engine into the clip, like this. So now I have my audio source with a clip, and I want to loop it. I want to click loop. It's going to play on awake, which means when this game object player comes into my scene, automatically it's going to start to play, and it's going to loop. It's going to continue to go there forever. Are you with me? What happened? You have to turn up your volume. I'm going to come see you guys in a second. Make sure it all works. All right, it's no sound until you run it. If I run the game now, right? If I run the game, you can see now that I'm hearing the sound in the game. I'm just making it low. If I'm going to make it louder, I can make it louder. There we go. Right? Okay, so that's how I add sound. I just added in here, and I made it play immediately. And hey, we got our player so far. There you go. Okay. Make sense? Player. Guys, I don't want to lose my player settings. I'm going to make this into a prefab. Okay, so notice I have this prefabs folder down here. I'm going to drag and drop my player from the hierarchy now into the prefabs folder like this. Look, like this. Dragging it in there. And when I do that, my player turns blue. My player turns blue. This means it's a prefab. A prefab is like an instance. It's ready to be made into an instance. Okay, so I grabbed it from here. It's like a blueprint in Unreal. I grabbed it from here, and I dragged it into my prefabs folder. Right here, there's a prefabs folder. I just dragged and dropped it from here to there. Now it becomes blue. Now this is really great because I can have player in different scenes. If I have more than one scene now, I can use the exact same player configuration. I can just drop it from here, and I don't have to do all this work. It'll remember, right? I'm making a blueprint, a template. How to do that? I just dragged and dropped. I took my player and dragged it into prefabs. It'll turn blue. Cool. Are we good? Okay, we have about an hour and a half left. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to make the ocean move. We'll get that part done. All right, so let's stop recording, and then I'll put this video up on YouTube.